Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and today we are going to be talking about 5 questions to ask yourself. 5. I always hold up 2 hands, but this is 10, so 5. 5 questions to ask yourself before you buy a plant. So there are a lot of questions that should go through your mind before you buy a plant, before you even show up to the garden center. But I want to talk about 5 things you should ask yourself or just have a conversation with yourself or whoever you're with to decide whether or not you should bring this plant home. So at the beginning of 2020, I had this goal to really focus on the plants that I already had and nurture those plants and really just like slow down on my plant buying, because 2019 was a really big plant buying year for me. I mean, it was really like the year that I really got into houseplants. I mean, I started collecting in like January 2018, but after about a year of collecting, you kind of understand a little bit better what you're good at, and 2019 was my year. So in 2020, I wanted to slow down a little bit, and I definitely did. But now in 2021, we might be in a year where things kind of pick back up. So I want to take those lessons that I learned and applied in 2020 and bring them into 2021, this new year full of hope and possibilities. I have a new house. We know that I'm wanting to build a greenhouse. So I have lots of opportunities to buy new plants and to fill up my home. And I just want to make sure that I'm, number 1, being a good steward of my money, and number 2, not bringing home plants that I'm not going to be able to take care of for whatever reason it may be. So if you want to take care of houseplants long term, these are some questions that you should be regularly asking yourself when you go out shopping, because I can't tell you how many times I've walked around a garden center and not brought something home. And saying that now, myself in 2018 and 2019 would probably be really surprised, because I pretty much never left empty-handed when I went out shopping. I'd always find something to buy, but really that wasn't very healthy, and I ended up killing a lot of plants. So a killed plant is wasted money, you know what I mean? So we talked a little bit about plants and finances a few videos ago, and I thought that it would be really important to continue that conversation in a way that sort of promotes wise spending with houseplants. And it's definitely something that I'd like to talk about more. Again, I want to make another finance-driven video in the summer or spring after I've done more purchasing, so that we can just talk about my decision making in that process and, you know, how much I really spent. Because I think like a lot of people in the comments were saying like, yeah, I had no idea how expensive houseplants really were and like how expensive this hobby could be. But I do firmly believe that houseplant collecting is as expensive as you want it to be. But yeah, I guess we'll get into the video now. The first question that I want you to ask yourself is, can I actually care for this plant? I know that it might sound like a little bit silly, or maybe it doesn't, but the care cards on the plant, there's usually a care card of some kind. If there's not one on the specific plant, there might be one on like the table that the plant is sitting on, because usually like plants are paired together. So, you know, if you don't see a care card or anything like that, I would suggest, highly suggest, going online and researching the plant a little bit. I mean, there are literally, maybe not hundreds, that's a little bit much, but there's at least 5 articles that you could find right at the top of that Google search that will tell you how to care for that specific plant. Because if a plant is common enough to be found in a garden center, it's probably common enough for a few people to have talked about it online. And if you do have my book, Houseplants for Beginners, there are 120 houseplant profiles, and the profiles are broken up into beginner, intermediate, and advanced plants. So 3 sections with 120 plants total that will tell you, you know, how difficult this plant is in general and in my experience. Because I know that some plants are easy for some and hard for me, so I tried to get a very general sense of the plant and its difficulty. So you can see, actually I have my book right here, the end cap right here. So the blue are those easy plants, the orange is the intermediate, and then the red is the more difficult plants. Where is that? Oh yeah, here we go. See, there's not that many difficult ones. So I don't know, just something to consider. I mean, there's entire profiles on the plants, so just a quick little promo there. But anyway, so turn to Google, turn to a resource, turn to a friend, and find out what the care on this plant looks like. Because if you are looking at the plant and you're really excited by it, it can be very easy to just walk away with it and not really put much thought like beyond that. And also something that you should consider when you're looking at a plant is, when you're looking at a plant, you can tell basically what it needs based on, you know, how it looks. So this is a calathea, and I don't remember exactly which one, and I'm gonna screw it up. I tried to ID it in a video and I totally messed it up. So it's a calathea, okay? So calathea are usually a little bit more stubborn plants that need a little bit more help. As you can see, I do have some imperfect leaves, you know what I mean? But on the regular, we have still a very beautiful plant. So this plant has very thin stems here, which indicates to me that it doesn't hold very much water. And in addition to that, the leaves are also very thin, almost papery, which is another indication that it doesn't hold very much water. So looking at little things like that, and I've made an entire video like how to know a plant's needs when you're just looking at it. I'll link that down below as well. Look at the plant and examine it and try to figure out what you think it would need based on the thickness of the leaves, the thickness of the stems. Things like that will definitely be a good indication to tell you how needy the plant is going to be and if you're really up for that kind of a challenge. The second question you should ask yourself when plant shopping is this the best price I've seen, or is this the only price I've seen? So something that was so hard for me at the beginning was walking away from a plant when I saw it for the first time. Okay, so one of the first times that I ever did this was actually this is so funny because it's a plant that I just really despise now, but still somehow have held on to it. So we know my ficus altissima. I've had so many issues with that plant. I've talked about in so many videos how I hate it, I regret buying it, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, I don't know if I actually do regret buying it because it has taught me a lot, which plants tend to do. If you hold on to them for a long time, they will teach you so much. But basically, I saw that plant at the nursery and I was starstruck. Like I was going through a ficus thing where I just wanted all the ficus. And thank God I didn't collect all of them and kill all of them. But anyway, I saw it and I was so excited. I took a photo of it. Posted about it on Instagram. I wanted to tell everybody that I found this great plant, and then I went home and I didn't buy it. And this was probably the first time that I ever did that. I didn't buy a plant right away because I was kind of killing a lot of plants at that point, and I wanted to make sure that I could actually take care of it. So it was a good price. I think it was like $35 or $45 or something like that for like a 3-foot ficus. I felt at the time that it was a good deal. So I basically went online and I looked around quite a bit to see what other people were selling it for, and I just waited a while. And I decided to go back like 2 weeks later, I think, and it was still there. So I decided to buy it. And this is definitely something that takes practice. I mean, it's not easy to walk away from a plant, especially if it's the first time you've ever found it in person and you've been thinking about this plant a lot. But I really believe that, you know, I talk about this a lot in my videos, like the plant that you're looking at right here, like this calathea is not the only calathea of its type, you know what I mean? And if I didn't feel confident about the price or whether or not I could care for it, I could have walked away and found it again another time. I think that's so important to remember. Early plant parents, or just even myself now, I forget that a lot of the time. And I will buy something right away just because I'm like, it seems like a good price, I'm in, you know what I mean? Even if it is just you sitting there and Googling the plant a couple of times, like how much is it regularly selling? You can search for it on Etsy. You can just do a regular Google search. Whatever you want to do, you can find how much it's selling for online, and then that can give you a little bit of an indication of what it should be selling for in stores. And in my experience, typically the price in stores is about the same or a little bit less than the online price. And you have to consider with online prices, they never or hardly ever factor in shipping. So for example, if the plant is like $40 in person, but it is $35 online, the in-person plant is probably going to be a better deal because you're going to be spending at least $10 to $15 on shipping. So in the end, this plant will be more expensive, the online plant will be more expensive, and you also have to deal with whatever the plant goes through during shipping, because it's pretty much inevitable that a plant will experience some sort of shock when it goes through shipping. I don't know, well, I do know what it is. I mean, it's because it's in a box for a few days and it's being jostled around. It's going from a greenhouse to your home. There's a lot of reasons why plants experience shock after shipping, but for the most part, like when you can bring a plant home from the store to your house directly, it will experience much less problems. That's why I much prefer to shop in person if I can. But yeah, is it the best price you've seen or is it the only price you've seen? So even if it is just a quick search, I want you to make sure that you know that there are other buying options and find out how much it is selling for elsewhere. Question number 3 that you need to ask yourself before you buy a plant is, where are you going to put it? Cool if you could take care of it, cool if you want to buy it, but where is it going to go? So when I go out plant shopping, I usually have an area in mind that I want to fill up with a plant. So for example, this spring, I want to buy a bunch of pothos. I want to have like trailing plants coming down from this like faux balcony in my sunroom, and maybe not just pothos, but maybe like heartleaf philodendron or some Scindapsus pictus, just beautiful trailing plants. Okay, so I have that spot in mind for those plants, so I know the conditions and I know how big of a plant that I can get. Those are the 2 most important things, I believe. I mean, are they the most important? No, they are. That's extremely important. Because when you bring a plant home and you have nowhere to put it, it will end up sitting somewhere that is not ideal, or it will be crammed in with your other plants, possibly touching other plants, which is literally the worst thing you can do. You always want to isolate your plants when you bring them home, just as a hot tip, because they could be bringing in pests, they could be bringing in bacteria, just a bunch of nasty stuff. So you just want to make sure that you quarantine them, you know, when you get home for at least a week. But anyway, so if you have a place picked out for the plant, you know the conditions and you know the size of the plant that you can get. So you're only keeping that plant in mind. It's a really great way to avoid overspending and, let's say, misspending, you know what I mean? Spending money on the wrong thing. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty short and sweet. So let's go on to the next one. Number 4, is the plant healthy and pest-free? Sometimes when you see a plant, it can be very easy to be starstruck and so excited that you're seeing this plant for the first time, or you're finding it again if you've been searching for it. And yeah, it can be really easy to just pick something up and start walking around with it. But what you need to do is you need to check the plant for pests. Nurseries are not immune to pest issues. There have been so many times where I've walked around a nursery and I've looked up and I've seen just like thick spider mite webs. And this doesn't mean that the plant is going to die. It's just a question. You get to question in your mind, like, do I want to walk into this? Like, or do I just want to like not bring home spider mites? You know what I mean? At this point in my life, if a plant had spider mites and I brought it home, I don't know if I would be that upset, because like I'm so used to having spider mites. I pretty much am like always controlling a spider mite infestation on some point of my indoor garden. But that's just because it's been a thing for so long for me. So anyway, so would I bring home a plant that has spider mites? Possibly. It depends if it's a good price, if it's a plant I've been looking for. It just depends, really. But in that case, you really have to isolate it. But more importantly, you need to know about it before you bring it home. So I feel like a lot of people would not suggest bringing home a plant with spider mites, and that's like definitely good advice. If you want to do it, just be cautious, you know what I mean? So what you can do to check specifically for spider mites is you hold the plant up to the light, which there is no lack of natural light in a greenhouse, and you check along this portion right here where the petiole, the leaf, meets the stem. That's called a petiole. You look there and you see if there's any webbing forming. And then what you do is you look at the surface of the leaf and you see if you can find any bumps, see if you can find any little crawlies. You look at the underside of the leaf and you see if you can see any white specks or bumps as well. Sorry, that's my dog playing with his toy. Koopy! Plants, just because you don't see the pest right now, that doesn't mean that there is not a pest on that plant. Pests can pop up later on if they're in like the larva stage or something like that. So just because you brought a plant home that is pest free doesn't mean that it actually is. So just something to think about as well. And that's why you isolate them as soon as you get home. And the last question that I want you to ask yourself when you are buying plants is this a smart use of my money, or am I being frivolous? I think that it's very, very common to go through this list and everything checks out. And then at the end of the day, like at the end of the moment where you're deciding whether you are gonna buy the plant or not, you still feel like, I don't need this. You know, I feel like I'm just buying this because I wanna buy a plant. Yeah, I have the space, but is this plant really something that I love? And I think that's such an important distinction to make when you're plant shopping, because it's so easy to be starstruck by a plant. I mean, it happens to me literally all the time, but what's more important is for you to be making a smart financial decision, because in the end, you are making an investment. Buying a plant is an investment. It will hopefully get much bigger, and maybe you can propagate off of it and sell the propagations or whatever you want to do, or share it with a friend. But in the end, you're still spending money on something, and we should always try to be wise with our money. Now, I don't want to sound like a total stiff, like obviously you can treat yourself, but make sure that you are in the financial situation to be able to do so, because owning plants is not cheap, you know, especially in recent times. There are ways to do it on the cheap. I'm totally aware of that, and I would suggest those options like trading and propagating your own plants instead of always going out to buy something. But if you want to buy something, at the end of the day, you're gonna do it if you really want it. And I just want to make sure that we're going through the proper steps to make sure that it is a good use of our money and that we're not killing a plant for no reason and making an impulse purchase. You know, impulse purchases are like the enemy of me. My enemy is an impulse purchase. I make them a lot, and I'm trying really hard not to do that. And I feel like I have really been able to control my impulses with buying plants, and I wanted to share what I do in my head to decide whether or not I'm gonna buy a plant. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful for you. If you have any additional questions that you ask yourself before you buy a plant, go ahead and leave them in the comment box below and let's talk about it. All right, have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.